It's March 21st, 1905. The captain didn't make it. I've seen a man set on fire and burned to death before, but I've never seen someone burn from the inside out. Smoke coming from her lungs with every breath like a dragon, blue fires on the tip of her tongue. Such was her punishment for entering the Blue Kingdom, I suppose. Who would think they could enter the land of the dead without paying the price? With her last breath, she bade me one final command. Be a better captain than she ever could. That's certainly a tall order, but I made her a promise. The task is daunting. I've been a Z sailor since I was a lad, but I've always been one to follow orders. I've never given them. I can only hope the men will show me the same respect they've shown Whitlock. Whitlock, she was never private with us, but I always had this feeling we'd never gotten the entire truth from her. In addition to bestowing upon me the command of the Orphean, she gave me a final request. That large black box of hers that's been sitting in her office, it's to make its way to an address in London. I'm not to look inside. I'm not to ask any questions. I'm anxious about whatever its contents may be, but I'm a man of my word. I've made her this promise. No matter what nightmares and terrors await us between here and there, I'm going to deliver this package. This review ended up being a little longer than I anticipated being. There's no fancy editing on the screen here, just unedited gameplay footage as usual, though this review is a little longer than my usual videos, so just feel free to listen to this in the background like it's a podcast. I also want to go ahead and say I'm sorry for the way my voice sounds. I know it sounds a little weird. I'm on the tail end of a sickness. I'm almost better, so I just wanted to record this while it was still fresh. Thanks. Sunless Skies is an adventure set in an alternate world where Great Britain has expanded into a sideways parallel universe, traversed the skies in flying locomotives, blew up the sun, and then created a new one in its place for the glory of Queen Victoria. Not everything is great here in the Untersee, as they call it, the Z for short. A war is brewing out here in the Reach where the settlers, known as the Tacites, are rebelling against the crown. It's commonplace to be traveling through the Z and find war break out between jalopy locomotive engines teaming up against crown trains, but you've got bigger things to worry about, bigger than the British Empire, the absolute horrors that await you out there. Z sailors spend months out there in the Breach trying to make their way in the world with simple deliveries for cash, or fighting for independence, or exploring the seemingly infinite void. But those who do, they suffer under the strain of chaos and madness that comes with this lifestyle. There's a certain Lovecraftian horror to Sunless Skies that envelops the lore and its world building. There's monsters out there, untamed wilderness and elements, cosmic horror. Early on in the game, one of your first crewmates comes across as reckless and a bit of a daredevil, but you learn more and discover that actually it's a parasitic fungus that's taken over their brain and is driving them to such reckless behavior. Survivors aboard derelict vessels are often saved by the player only to reveal they've gone insane from the pressures of the Z, which led to the collapse of their train in the first place. Time also doesn't really work right out there. Nuggets of time can be mined from chunks of land floating in the abyss. The two massive clock towers on either end of the breach are constantly being adjusted and checked against each other because over time they desynchronize, and it's not faulty engineering to blame. Sections of the breach are dominated by fungus and fallen gods, others by ice and snow guarded by eldritch beings. When you first start playing the game and get teamed up on by a group of marauders firing cannons at you, you think you know how the game is going to be played, but you don't. The marauders are the easy ones. Looking at the trailer video on the store page for Sunless Skies, I think I had an incorrect assumption about how the game was going to play out. It looks like an adventure shooter that controlled similar to Asteroids, but the more I played the game, the more I realized that ship, or train combat rather, that all takes a backseat to the story. The story is simply whatever you choose it to be, as there's plenty of threads to pick up on, and it's certainly not linear. In the intro to this review, I mentioned how Captain Whitlock's creepy black box needed to get back to London. That definitely does need to happen, but London is a hop, skip, and jump across the steampunk Mass Effect relay system back to Albion, that area of Untersee where you are not located. To get there, however, you need a royal decree to trade for a permit to use it. But I've been playing this game for 5 hours, and I am no closer to figuring out how to get that than it was when I started. I can only hope that channeling my proud American heritage and joining up with the independent colonists didn't piss off the Crown so much they decided never to mention it in front of me. If you're not a man of your word, like me, and decide you don't want to bother trying to figure it out, you actually can just sell the black box. I'm not even joking, you can sell the main quest item, and depending on how well the other factions like you, you can get either $30 in a six-pack or a brand new train that actually goes faster than a brisk jog. There really is a lot of freedom in what you can do in Sunless Skies. Forgive me for the pun I'm about to make. The game isn't linear, you can truly go off the rails in Sunless Skies. The main problem I have with this, however, is that I don't think the open world is very fun. The map is very large and your locomotive is very slow. You can technically save up for a new locomotive, but that takes a long time to save up money, especially when you have to constantly restock fuel and supplies. Fuel is important because without it your train won't run, and supplies are important because they're resources you can use for scouting, and when you run out of supplies, your crewmates all succumb to hunger within a day and begin to cannibalize each other. That'll sate them for a while, but once you've got about 5 crewmates left and everyone has to do double duty, stress rises faster. Next thing you know, a floating corpse hits your windshield and they threaten mutiny unless you jettison all your trade goods in order to appease the angry dead. The leveling up system is actually really neat. You start off the game selecting a package for your captain's traits. For my first run, I played a lifelong Z-sailor who smuggled for money, giving him a boost in the iron and mirrors traits, which allegedly makes it easier for you to pass checks based around deception and brute force. I will clarify that when I say allegedly, it's because no matter how many times I've boosted my iron and mirror stats, I've never had higher than a 50% chance to succeed on any roll that I make. The neat part of leveling up isn't the stat boosting, because I actually don't know if that actually works or does anything. The neat part is that leveling up your captain is this narrative character building process. Level ups are called facets, and they represent a part of your character's history that made them the way they are. Facets that really stuck out to me were memorable things like betrayal. Someone in your past betrayed you. Who and why? Was it your lover or a close friend? Depending on whatever you pick, that'll give you a different bonus. My personal favorite one, which kind of helped with world building and set up for me, was you lost something great once. Was it your home, where after a year at Z, you've returned to find you don't love anyone who is at your home anymore? You know who they are, you know their face, but you don't care about them. Or was it that time you lost a year of your life when you fell overboard from your train and woke up stranded on a rock a year later with no memory to show for it? If you haven't guessed by now, the gameplay mechanics of Sunless Skies are perfectly intertwined with its lore and setting. This is where I have to make some complaints, however. The lore and setting are actually way better than the actual gameplay. I want to read a book about my character in Sunless Skies. I don't want to play this game anymore. It took me a while to figure out what my complaints were about this game, because this isn't even a bad game, I'm just not enjoying it. Saying that out loud is just, it seems like a paradox, but I've always been a firm believer that just because I don't enjoy something doesn't mean that it isn't good. It probably is a great game for a lot of other people, but the actual gameplay of this is where I'm lost. This is going to be kind of a weird segue, kind of a weird detour, but I think I want to make a comparison to another game here for a second. You guys might have heard this one. It's a little indie dev thing called Death Stranding. For those of you who haven't played Death Stranding, it's a game about post-apocalypse America. The term Death Stranding comes from an event where the world of the living and dead are connected and jumbled up, and when a person dies, their body becomes a BT, which essentially is a stranded ghost in the living world. And if it eats a human soul, it combusts and creates a crater, obliterating everything in that area. Basically, your corpse turns into a nuke if it's not immediately disposed of. You play as Sam, a porter, a post-apocalypse delivery guy. In order to demonstrate the world around you, the world of the game, one of the first things you do as Sam is to transport a body to an incinerator and avoid the interdimensional ghosts between point A and point B. The timefall, which is rain that temporally accelerates anything it touches, that's another danger to be wary of, and you take precautions, and you just wait it out in real time. And I absolutely enjoyed the game and the world building, and I was so immersed, and I was role-playing in this game, and then I just had this weird realization, this thought just popped into my head. And it said, there's another 35 hours of this. and that just kind of stumped me. Like, I don't know why I had that thought, but I couldn't get it out of my head. There's another 35 hours of this. I enjoyed it. I loved Death Stranding up until I had that weird thought in my head. And from there, I just couldn't shake it, and I just couldn't enjoy this game anymore. I want to know what happens in that story, but that, I think, was my brain telling me, you don't really like playing this game. And the reason I bring this little anecdote up is because I had the same thought and the same experience with Sunless Skies. To meme on game journalists a bit, as I like to do, Sunless Skies really makes you feel like a steampunk sky space locomotion captain, but I do not enjoy the management and the grinding of that. And while I'm on grinding, I want to touch on something. I want to say I read the reviews on the Steam page once I started questioning whether or not I actually like this game, and one of the reviews said that this was a sequel to Sunless Seas, and that they really fixed the grind for Sunless Skies. And the way that the game is now, if this is the fixed grind, I don't ever want to play Sunless Seas. I've had a bit of a hard time writing the script because I'm trying to put into words what my frustrations were, and that was really hard for me to do. I normally will just play a game for a few hours and then write up the review in one day, but it took me some time to figure out what my complaints were, and here we are. Because for a while I could really only come up with it's boring or it's too hard, and I don't want to say that because it's not. It's really not. The train moves at a dreadfully slow pace, and the world map is huge, but it's not actually even a world map, it's like the region map, but the region is huge, and there's like 3 of them. The world isn't even completely open because you can go wherever, so it's kind of like open world, but they're just pathways that you have to take between areas, and most of the pathways are just thin corridors between giant floating earthy land masses, and there isn't always something to do in between it other than just listen to the repetitive sound of the engine just chugging along, you know? The chugging of the train actually is just like, it's a mental drain for me. It drives me insane. It's so repetitive, and I ended up turning the audio off, and I was listening to a scam baiter on Twitch in the background instead of the audio for the game. I did enjoy the train fights between myself and the Marauders. Those were pretty cool, but they were so few and far between, they rarely happened enough for me to point them out as a highlight of this game. There are points of interest on the map, but half of them require upgrades to your ship that cost more than I'd ever been able to hold on to at one time. The other half were skill checks, which, as I mentioned earlier, never seemed to get easier no matter how many times I upgraded the skill. At character creation, you can choose one of 3 ambitions for your captain, which are basically like quest lines, and I chose Fortune as my character's ambition. The end goal, I think, of the Fortune ambition is to buy a big home at a major port, and that's going to run you 500 sovereigns. The most I'd ever held in my 5 hours of playing were 350, and that's because there was always something more important to spend money on. You got to the other side of the breach for a quest, well, you ended up using all of your fuels and supplies, and your reward was half the money that you need in order to restock where you were before you left for it. You decide to search a derelict engine to scavenge food. Well, you failed that skill check, the engine collapses and 5 of your men fall into the sky. It's going to cost you twice what you made there in order to recruit more guys, more crewmates on your ship. Did you finally arrive at that minor port you were supposed to take your passenger? Well, too bad the giant flying isopods that smash into your ship cause so much damage, you're going to break even after that person's payment. The grind is real. Every time I made money from doing a trade or a transport job, something else immediately came to take it away from me. And maybe that's grim realism, maybe that's the point, but it wasn't fun for me. I want to know more about this universe and this setting. I think it's really cool, and I want to know more, but I really want to know what's in that black box. But when it all comes down to it, video games are about fun. And I didn't have fun playing this game. I don't like saying that, trust me. I like video games, and there's a lot of this game that I really like, but I just didn't have fun playing it. Maybe it's just not for me. Maybe it's for you, but for me, just let me know when the book comes out. Or even better, if they ever put out like a tabletop version of this game, like a board game, or like a role-playing game like Dungeons & Dragons, I'll play the hell out of that. I'll GM it. I'll put it on my stream at twitch.tv/Vicedets. But I don't enjoy the game the way it is. It's an incredible grind, and it's not fun. I played this for 5 hours, and I think 5 hours is more than fair of an amount of time to say you spent trying to get into something. 5 hours is 5 episodes of a TV show. 5 hours is 250 pages of a novel, on average. There's clearly a lot of great qualities to this game, and it's crafted with great visuals and a great story. I think this is a great game for other people, but I don't think it's a great game for me. Despite that, I recommend Sunless Skies.